Adding trim to the Calla Trousers panel is the really fun part with many options, from a simple tape to piping or Ric Rac and even lace or bows. I'm going to demonstrate some simple methods to add trim to your panel. Watch the whole lot for inspiration or choose the chapter you need for the technique you want. The simplest way to customise your trousers is to add tape down the centre of the panel. First, we're going to measure the panel piece carefully. I'm using a ruler, but you can use a tape measure. Then we're going to use this measurement to cut the trim. It's important to have the same length for your trim so that it fits the panel perfectly. We don't want that panel to stretch out. I'm going to attach the trim in the middle of my panel, and we can use pins, but I like to use fabric glue. It keeps it in place and stops it moving a little bit more. Once I'm happy with the position roughly, I'm going to add my glue to the back of the ribbon. I'm attaching it to the trim rather than the fabric, so I don't stretch that fabric out. And you can estimate where that's going to be because we can move it around a little bit. So once it's on your fabric, and then just do a little check by measuring all the way down that it's even. And once you're happy with that, we give a little press down, keep it in place. Once it's attached, we're going to edge stitch down both sides of your trim, being careful again not to stretch that fabric as you sew. Piping can be added to both sides of the panel, but we do say that if you're adding an inseam pocket to the front, that you only add piping to the back. To add piping to the side seam, we're going to trim the piping in the same way as we did before to ensure that we don't stretch out, and lay it over the side seam that we want to attach it to. The corded part will sit to the inside because this is what we want to see when we're finished, and it's really important to measure carefully all the way down. We can use a guide like this set to 1.5 and place it on the edge, just checking where that stitching line is going to be. And it's important to do this all the way down. So we pin and check all the way. So as we go, we're pinning and checking. And then we will lay the other piece over the top once that's basted, stitch down at 1.5 all the way down. Adding Ric Rac, we can have a lot of fun with this one. You can add one down the centre, like this large one here. We can add multiple all the way down the panel, or even insert it into the seam. Adding the Ric Rac, placement is key. If you want it down the centre, you simply place it over the top and use a measuring tool just to check all the way down that it's even on both sides. If you want to insert it into the seam, I like to add a line down the fabric to mark the seam allowance so I know exactly where it's going to be. So you can measure your seam allowance, set it to 1.5, measure the seam allowance width all the way down. 1.5, and this will give us a guide for where the Ric Rac needs to be. Once I've got that, just join them up with my ruler, and then I know exactly where the stitching line is going to be. Then it's about where you want the Ric Rac to show. How much of it can you see? So here we just have a little bit peeking out, or whether you would like more, you can place it along the middle of the Ric Rac. Once you're happy with the placement and it's even all the way down, you can glue or pin again, and then attach your panel once you've sewn it on. And remember, your unpicker here is your friend. If it's not right, if a bit overlaps, just unpick that little bit and do it again. There really is no limit to how creative you can get with your Calla trousers. Gathered lace, you can add bows, ribbons horizontally to create bows all the way down. Here I've added bias binding in 2 rows to tie near the bottom. If you have any questions about the techniques we've shown you, just pop your questions below. We can't wait to see how creative you get with yours.